Alrighty. Well, I think we can kick off, and I'll keep admitting folks as they enter. Hi, everyone. For those of you who haven't met me yet or joined one of our webinar sessions yet this summer, my name is Rachel Lieblein-Jabala. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the programs manager at the Spencer Educational Foundation. For those of you who may be less familiar with Spencer, our foundation is dedicated to funding the education of tomorrow's risk management and insurance leaders. And we're really so excited to offer this webinar series as a free opportunity for current students and recent graduates to connect with and learn from a host of really exciting and incredible industry professionals. And we are so excited that you're here joining us today for today's session, Cybersecurity Demands a Modern Risk Management Approach, with Ron Davis, Jessica Aguilar, and David Schluger from Zurich. Before we kick off with our session, I have a couple of housekeeping notes. So first thing is that this meeting is being recorded, so you'll have access to it. It will be posted on Spencer's website after the fact. So you'll be able to revisit any information you see here today or hear here today and share it with anyone who wasn't able to join in real time. The second piece of housekeeping is that there will be opportunity for Q&A at the end of the presentation today. So you can please feel free to write in any questions in the chat as we go along, and that'll add that to the queue. So Ron and Jessica and David can address those questions at the end. Again, I know we're all zoomed out, right? We've been on meetings virtually this whole year plus. So please make this fun and enjoyable for yourself. If you see someone in the call that you want to connect with, send them a quick note, connect with them after, etc. And now I'm going to first kick off by introducing our first speaker, Ron Davis. Ron is Executive Vice President and Global Head of Customer Management with Zurich Commercial Insurance. He has over 30 years of experience working with many of the world's largest national companies and has held various leadership roles in Europe, Canada, and the United States. He sits on the Spencer Board of Directors. Ron, we're so grateful for you, and was the chairperson of the Spencer Board in 2016 and 2017. So Ron, thank you so much for organizing this session and stewarding it on the Zurich side, and I'll pass it over to you to introduce David and Jessica.
That's great. Thank you so much, Rachel. And look, I'm really delighted to be here today together with Jessica and with David, and we're obviously big supporters of the Spencer Educational Foundation. We've been involved for many, many years, and I've been involved on the board since 2011. And so I've seen very close up what Spencer stands for, and it's very compatible with what Zurich Insurance Company's view of education and sharing insights and creating the right kind of environment for people to be able to flourish and to really have exciting careers. And what we found is that there's an underappreciation for the role and the importance of the insurance industry in whether it's society, whether in business. And for younger people, a lot of people, many of you may have insurance and have thought about insurance, and a lot of other people may not be thinking about it as a career or not realize the wide range of jobs and opportunities there are. And so for people like myself, for Jess and for David and the thousands of other employees that are in the industry, and also those that are with Zurich, it's just extremely exciting and fulfilling to be able to add value to people's lives and to businesses. That's part of what it's all about. And so we're very well aligned with Spencer in trying to promote, number one, the industry and the kinds of careers and opportunities that are involved. So when you look at the session today, David and Jess will take you through it. Let me give you a little bit of background on who they are. So let's start with Jessica. So Jessica is the Vice President of Talent Acquisition with Zurich North America, and she joined Zurich in 2018. She manages our recruitment efforts to ensure that we attract the top talent in the industry. Jessica was previously with Anthem, Anthem Inc., where she was Staff President of Talent Acquisition, with a number of other responsibilities, and she held similar roles and did consulting in other areas with Fortune 100 companies. Jessica holds a bachelor's degree in journalism with a concentration in computer science and fine arts from Indiana University. So welcome to Jessica. And David Schluger. David leads the cyber risk engineering services within Zurich Resilience Solutions in North America. He's responsible for the group's technically advisory internally to cyber underwriters, as well as to the risk improvement strategy externally for our customers. Prior to joining the Zurich Resilience Solutions team, David worked as a senior deal architect with our Zurich Strategic Risk Solutions underwriting team. And before that, he was the chief of staff for our CEO of Global Corporate North America. He was a global property underwriter and a consultant. So he's had a 12-year career with Zurich, done a lot of different things, as you can hear, and he'll talk to you about some of that. And David holds an MBA from New York University's Stern School of Business and a bachelor's degree in entrepreneurship and emerging enterprises from Syracuse University. So let's dive right in, and let me pass it over to David.
Thank you, Ron. So really pleased to be here, and I'll go through the agenda, but Ron humbly left out one thing, which is that I'm a Spencer Scholar, two-time.
Very true.
And very thankful to the organization and supported me through my education. And I wouldn't be where I am today without that support and the support of Zurich. So I'm really happy. To me, this is me giving back, right? So with that, let's dive in. So I wanted to just kind of go through very briefly what it is we're going to try to talk about in the next 30, 40 minutes here, saving plenty of time for your questions. So first, we want to set the stage and just talk about the risks that are out there. What are the different things posed by technology? How's the world changing? What are some claims examples that we're seeing from the insurance side? And really just make sure we all have a good baseline on what is the risk? What's the risk landscape? The second thing is to think about the risk management approach and strategies that companies should be taking, they are taking, we're advising them, and what all that looks like. And really what that leads into is how can you play a role in that long term? And that's where we'd like to kind of end, and why, very fortunate to have Jess here, is how do you steer your career towards this growing risk area? So I think, buckle up, we're in for a ride here, and thanks for joining. So I wanted to start off with a few headlines, and I can tell you as I go around and do presentations similar to this one, this is always the last slide I develop because, we started building some content for this, several weeks, over a month ago. And if I'd pulled the examples then, it would have been outdated, right? So we see these in the headlines every single day. Just today, my Advisen news feed, and if you don't follow Advisen, that's another good source of intelligence in our industry. But just talking about how ransomware attacks are really just growing rampantly, and what is the solution? No one really knows. So hopefully we get to some of that solution by the end of this. But to bring up a few examples, you probably are familiar with at least several of them. So the Colonial Pipeline, that one still pretty fresh. And while probably could have found some more recent ones, I think it's been a while since an attack has been that public and has really changed people's understanding so much. It was a very public ransomware attack. It shut down the Colonial gas pipeline for about 5 days. They shuttered operations, and you may have sat, if you live on the East Coast, in a gas line, waiting to try to fill up your car. Ironically or coincidentally, it's not that they were out of gas, it's that everyone panicked and thought they'd be out of gas, so they all went to fill up, and it actually just spiked demand. So really, the evidence we saw was not exactly due all to the breach. But why this is a really important one is that it was a hacking group called DarkSide, and this group did a ransomware attack on Colonial Pipeline. The ransom was about $4.4 million, if I recall, and it was paid. Colonial Pipeline paid it to recover their systems, but it just showed the vulnerability of our critical infrastructure. And it, this is when they start to haul people before Congress and ask all sorts of questions and do some Monday morning quarterbacking, trying to find out why was this able to happen. We'll get into some of the government's response and regulations coming out of this. Then I want to talk about JBS Meat. We're coming up on 4th of July, and in a past life as a Zurich risk engineer, I have toured beef processing facilities. And so I can tell you that the 4th of July holiday leading up to it is absolutely their busiest time of the year. That's when we consume the most hamburgers as a country. And, they are working all shifts overtime trying to get ready for that holiday as they process meat. So JBS Meat is the largest producer of meat in the country and actually in the world. I believe they process quarter of the beef that we consume in this country. They have 150 facilities, and they were hacked by a cybercrime group linked to Russia called REvil. And again, another ransomware attack that disrupted their operations. I want to say that was about a 4 or 5 day shutdown for JBS, and they have global operations. So just hugely disruptive. The next one I thought was interesting, and it was one I didn't know about, was that the New York City Metropolitan Transportation Authority, the MTA, that operates the subway and is one of the busiest mass transit organizations in the world, was breached by a group with ties to China. This was back in April, and again, another highlight of just how the critical infrastructure that we don't think about but we rely on is vulnerable to cyber attack, and they're just, that's why people say, oh, it's pervasive. It's because there are just so many targets out there, and it's really difficult to protect everything. And then finally, as students, I thought you might be particularly interested in Herf Jones had a data breach recently. And I remember Herf Jones as the company that was selling class rings, and I guess I forgot they also do the graduation caps and gowns, but they had a breach and had some students' credit card information exposed, and that's really the run-of-the-mill type of attack. You see those all the time. So probably several different ways. If you think about all this, you may have been personally impacted by one or all four of these attacks, whether you kind of knew it or not. So it's in the background of all of our lives. What I wanted to say, is just, I think I touched on the critical infrastructure aspect of this, which we'll talk some more about. But the thought of, several years ago, people would think that cyber crime and hacks and breaches really only affect technology companies, and those are the ones that are the real targets. Clearly, these are not technology companies, and so I think a former director of counterintelligence at the CIA said recently that every company is a cyber company, meaning every company has technology and data underpinning it and is vulnerable to one of these attacks. And so I think you can see how this weaves a thread through our entire economy, all industries, really no matter where you land in the workforce going forward and what role you play, there will be some aspect of cyber risk that you should be aware of, whether you're heavily involved in it or simply need it for situational awareness. I can say that there's no executive or board member out there who's not thinking about this and talking about this. So hopefully you find this the next set of information here relevant to you and your careers going forward. So I wanted to talk about the government response, and we see some headlines and there seems to be some action being taken. So this was just released in May of this year. It was directly in response to the high-profile attacks that some of which I just highlighted, especially Colonial Pipeline. That was really the straw that broke the camel's back. And then President Biden did just reinforce a lot of the elements of this executive order in his discussion with President Vladimir Putin when they had the U.S.-Russia summit just recently. So the executive order that was put out by the White House, here's a summary. It really establishes some new rules for federal agencies and their contractors. I'll go into this when we talk about the Nist cybersecurity framework, but if you think about what the federal government can control, one is they can pass laws that make private companies do certain things. But then two, which is often overlooked, is they can establish regulations that says of the billions of dollars the federal government spends in a variety of private industries, they can establish rules for what those companies must adhere to. And so that's really what this bullet is talking about. There are new IT security rules that are going to be put in place both for the federal agencies as well as the contractors that do business with them. The second is that this establishes new standards for commercial software as a baseline security requirement. So they're using industry best practices to put out guidance and basically say, what should most private companies have in place as a bare minimum? And so it's good to have that guidance out there. Many companies should be taking it much further. And as we review some of the frameworks that I'll show you, they should be taking a risk-based approach. So, you know, if you're steering your career in the direction of risk and risk management, this is where that starts to intersect. The third thing it does is it creates a national review board to analyze incidents, you know, kind of a post-mortem. And so that will give intelligence to citizens and private companies and really anyone who's a stakeholder after one of these attacks. And then finally, it standardizes how the government will respond in the event of an incident. That's standard practice that all companies should do on their own as well. So I just wanted to highlight, you know, kind of why this is coming to the fore and really what it means. So I pulled a few statistics. And the first one is that there's lots of estimates. You can find a wild range out there, but I trust McKinsey as a source. And their estimate is that the current cost of cybercrime on a global basis is about $1 trillion a year. I was going to do the one with all the zeros, but it really kind of carries off the page. And so, I mean, that's just staggering. It's 1.2% of global GDP. So that's a tax on everything that we buy and everything that we make and spend. That's just tacked on. I mean, you know, if we think about it that way, it's something that none of us should want to accept, and we should all really want to fight because there's, you know, these are just criminals that are preying on weak companies. Now, you could look at it the other way and say, well, the company should be stronger and we should really have better standards out there. So yes, welcome to the club. That's exactly where we're headed. So what do you do about the risk? The next stat I want to share with you is that, I think this is according to Marsh via the US Government Accountability Office, there are 3.6 million cyber insurance policies in force in the United States. So 3.6 million companies or individuals or organizations have purchased insurance that should cover them in the event of a cyber attack or breach. You know, not to dwell on the insurance component of it, but it should cover them for everything from the cost of identifying and remediating the breach to compensating any victims, whether that's the company themselves or third parties like customers or suppliers who have also been harmed financially by that breach. So that's what the insurance is there to cover. And the next stat I think is kind of goes hand in hand is about half of companies out there purchase cyber insurance. So you could look at that two ways. One is, wow, that's staggering that half of the companies in the US have cyber insurance. The other way to look at it is, wow, half the companies in the US don't have cyber insurance. And so no matter how you look at it, it's both a huge market to service already, as well as there's still a great amount of growth potential, because I think long-term, cyber insurance has to be as compulsory as buying directors and officers or property insurance or anything else to protect the crown jewels of the company. And then finally, this was a survey done on small business owners and operators. And basically 87% of them believe they're vulnerable to a cyber attack. So whether you have insurance or not is besides the point. Insurance very rarely makes you completely whole. All it does is really help make up that loss. But you're still down, you still wake up and you had the worst day of your entire professional career. You know, none of your systems work and you're looking at some screen that says, you know, pay me X number of Bitcoin in order to get your systems back. So pretty close to every small business in the country believes they're vulnerable. So to me, that says they need help. And that's why my role is exciting, is because I'm in position to help them with my team and help them feel less vulnerable, help them protect themselves from that attack, or help them recover in the case that they are breached. So here that brings us to our first poll question. So Rachel, if you could pop up the poll, please. So the question here is, based on what you know, or based on what I've told you, who do you think is winning this war? Is it the hackers or is it the defenders? So please take a moment and populate your response. And in a moment here, we will see what you think. I'm going to take it as well.
Give it a couple more seconds. All right, here we go.
Okay, drum roll, please. All right, overwhelmingly, we believe the hackers are winning. It's kind of what I expected. And unfortunately, that's the way I voted too. I think at the moment, the hackers are winning. Number one, because they're seeing results, right? $1 trillion in global cybercrime, that doesn't represent how much they're actually generating in terms of a profit from their ransomware, right? Because a lot of that is just in disruption and lost productivity. However, they are profiting off of their hacking, their ransomware. And that's just the commercial side of things. There's the whole cyber espionage and the counterintelligence aspect, where wars really aren't fought in the battlefield anymore so much as they are fought in cyberspace. Or I should say, spies aren't in dark alleys anymore. They're now in dark web pages. So we all sort of agree that the hackers are winning. And so I think that's a great segue into what do we actually do about it. And before we get there, I just wanted to highlight that one reason that they're winning is because it's relatively easy work. You know, to sit there behind an anonymous computer screen in a cyber cafe somewhere in, you know, Russia or China or North Korea, and launch this broad shotgun approach to thousands of companies at once. And all you need is one fish on the hook that then you start to reel in. So what I really want to tell you with that analogy is that they're going after the most vulnerable companies and individuals out there. And so that's why it's important that all companies establish at least the baseline of security, so that we have to make it harder for them to win. Okay. So I'm going to spend a few minutes here on this screen, and it's got a lot on it. But so give me a minute to help you orient towards it. So this is the Nist Cybersecurity Framework, or the Nist CSF. Nist is a governmental organization, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And the Nist Cybersecurity Framework came about as a response to another executive order. This was under Obama back in 2013. But I will point out that if there are no other bipartisan issues, cybersecurity is the one. There is broad agreement from, you know, both sides of the aisle. There has been movement through the Obama and the Trump and the Biden presidencies towards establishing better cybersecurity across industry. We all know it's an issue, and it's being addressed by both government and the private industry. But the Nist cybersecurity framework came out in 2013 as in response to an executive order back then. And the real reason to put this together was that they needed to put something out there that would meet the needs of both private businesses and governmental organizations. It was designed in a way that it was voluntary. So you don't have to adhere to Nist. It's just if you don't know what else to do, they offered a great starting point. Nist is also technology neutral. So what that means is that everyone can use Nist, regardless of what business you're in, regardless of what underlying technologies you use or don't use. And the most important thing is that Nist, or the Nist CSF, is performance-based. So that means that it's really focused on what outcomes you're trying to drive by using this process. It's not a checklist. It is not a one and done. This is sort of a way that you could structure your cybersecurity strategy. I think it's excellent for you all to know this much about Nist and the framework, because it is by far the most popular methodology out there. So if you land in government or you land at some private company, whether it's at an insurance company or a brokerage or somewhere else, there's a good chance that Nist is the standard that organization follows. There are some others. So there's ISO 27001 and 27002. There's the PCI DSS, which is the payment card industry data security standard. And then there's the CIS. They're all sort of parallel and they all kind of aim at the same mission, but none of them are as flexible, none of them are as broad as the Nist CSF. Okay, so let's try to unpack this a little bit. So you see 5 multicolored bars at the top. Identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So what you're looking at is one of the first key components of Nist, and that's the framework core. Those 5 components are the core of Nist. What you're not seeing on the screen is another component, which is the implementation tiers and guidance. And so what this is trying to tell you is these are the 5 areas you can focus on, and underneath them are 23 subcategories. These are the various areas that you would want to look at and assess yourself towards and try to adhere to some best practices. Then you can look at within these categories, what tier did I achieve? The tiers go 1 through 4, so it can go from partially kind of achieved to risk-informed, to repeatable, and then finally to adaptive. That's the highest level. And with most frameworks, everybody thinks, oh, I need to achieve the highest tier. I have to maximize it. It's actually not the case with Nist. Because it's an outcomes-based system and essentially a risk-based system, every business can look at the framework and they can say, well, based on what we do, we actually don't need to achieve level 4 in protect. Level 2 is satisfactory for our risk tolerance. So it actually helps marry what the company does and what their objectives are with how they need to protect themselves and where they need to invest. So it is a tool to help you prioritize your strategy. I want to just now touch on the 5 categories, because this is, I think, the important part, and I think the best piece of technical knowledge you can come away with. So I'll go through each of the 5 and just kind of touch on things I think about in each. So with identify, as you can see the categories underneath of it, this is where you're determining what assets do you have to protect, okay? So you always want to start with the crown jewels of the company. It could be your intellectual property, it could be your customer list, it could be systems that you cannot function without. So it's an asset management approach, and it's both, you could be looking at software you want to do an asset inventory of, it could be hardware, it could be people that are critical to you, it could be your supply chain, or even your customers if they're tied in. And so ultimately just think about an identifier, what are the crown jewels I'm trying to protect? And naturally that leads you into the next area. Okay, protect. What do I need to protect and how do I actually do it? It can be a mix of very technical firewalls and cyber controls. It can be as simple as awareness training that all employees should complete. It's basically your data security that you need to implement. It could be technology based or not. It could be offensive or defensive. So there's a lot that goes into protect. And most of the time when people think about cybersecurity, they're thinking about protect. It is just one component, but of course it's an important one, and it's really where you see the most tangible steps taken to protect the company, as it would be obvious. The next one, and you see a little line here, right? So everything up until this point is pre-breach or pre-anything happening in terms of a cyber incident to the company. Beyond this is maybe an incident has occurred. So the first thing you have to do is detect it. It's exactly as it sounds. And by the way, Nist wants it to be intuitive. So hopefully, you're feeling as smart as you should. The detect function is to try to ensure that you can have a timely discovery of an event so that you can move into the respond section if needed. So it can be somewhat automated with rules and alerts. It can be somewhat human-based, where you have, we call it eyes on glass, where people are watching terminals and trying to determine if a system alerts them to something. Is it a real alert, or is it just like, when I'm cooking and I set off the smoke alarm? My smoke alarm should at this point know that I'm just cooking, but it doesn't. Okay, next is respond. So something might have happened, and now we have to kick into gear and actually start to fix the problem. So for large companies, that might start with an internal team that's specifically set up to do this. For small companies, maybe their IT person, starts but really doesn't know where to go. In both cases, probably going to involve third parties, specialists who come in and do this. It could even involve law enforcement, the FBI. But ultimately, if it is an attack, you want to shut it down. You want to determine the level of the breach, and you want to start to take some early mitigation steps. But it's really trying to document what's happened. How bad is it? If they are in your system, where did they go? Can you get them out? What data was viewed or downloaded or compromised? And that really kind of bleeds into the next section, which is recovery. So, you have to get your data back, hopefully using very recent backups. Hopefully your backups aren't compromised, which is when hackers get in, the first thing they're going to go for is your backups, because ransomware is not really valuable if they're good recent backups. But ultimately, you're trying to methodically resume your business operations and kind of get back to business as usual. So that's the Nist cybersecurity framework in a New York minute. And there's a whole lot more you could go into, and sure, there's, from here, people can get really, really technical. But as you can hear, what we talked about was really not overly technical. It's really understanding how does the cybersecurity strategy need to tie into the overall business strategy. Just a moment on what Zurich does for our customers. So on a pre-cyber incident basis, a few things. One is my team, which is Zurich Risk Engineering, we provide the service to our customers. A customer can consult with some of the technical experts on my team to help determine where the gaps in the program are. We follow the Nist cybersecurity framework, and so customers, when they come on board with Zurich as an insurance customer or otherwise, have the opportunity to work with us to get some help. Second is that we can then deliver some pre-breach services, including reviewing their incident response plan, conducting a ransomware readiness assessment, and other services that we can provide ourselves. We also have some vendor partners with leading technical service providers, so we can deliver security and awareness training, penetration testing, privileged access management, which we work with a company called Dichotic. They're one of the leaders in that space, but all sorts of things that we don't do ourselves, but we know companies need. We're trying to make sure we have available to our customers. Finally, we put out thought leadership from time to time, both on our website and our various channels, as well as the eRisk Hub, which is a resource that all customers have access to. So we really try to support our customers prior to any incident happening, because if you think about it, as their insurer, our interests are aligned. we don't want them to have a breach any more than they want to have one. And so it's in all of our best interest to try to make sure that they're not the most vulnerable, and hopefully the hackers move on to some easier prey. After an incident, if you have cyber insurance, these are some of the steps, and for a Zurich customer, they could follow. They could make first contact with a cyber crisis response area. Some of the steps, will vary, but basically a cyber crisis response manager would then come in and start to assess. Sometimes they call it a breach coach. And this person will help triage the other experts that need to be brought in, whether that's legal, IT forensics, crisis communications. There's a whole host of people. It's like a good band. They all need to come together to make it sound good. And then finally, as if you're insured, you'd want to notify Zurich or your insurance company that you may have a covered claim, and so we can kind of start our file. So I want to kind of conclude my section a bit and transition over to Jess, and just talk for a moment about hopefully what you've come away with so far is that in this expanding world of cyber risk, there's a lot of different roles that you could personally play. They could be highly technical. So some of those would be in-house IT security or information security. Law enforcement, has a great need in this space. Investigation. There's a lot of technical stuff that needs to specifically happen if that's of interest to you. There's a lot of risk-based roles, and I'd consider myself either in that risk-based category or in that hybrid space, where insurance brokerages, risk managers all need to have some knowledge here so that they can battle this risk. Then there's the hybrid, where you need to kind of be somewhat technical but somewhat risk-based and have a interpersonal skills, and that's kind of the consulting, the project management space. Just to be specific, so if you're looking for a job in the insurance industry or with an insurer like Zurich, cyber risk awareness can come into play if you're an underwriter, if you're going to be a claims adjuster, if you're going to be a risk engineering consultant. A lot of our business analytics and our finance department have to be aware of a lot of this, as well as our sales team, our marketing group, our internal and external communications groups. There's really no one that can avoid the cyber risk knowledge. It's important. I found a really interesting stat that I didn't know what slide to put it on, so I put it here, which is that McKinsey believes there's 3.5 million cybersecurity positions currently open worldwide. So I think you found a pretty good space to look if this is of interest to you. My key message, and I think I'd be transitioning to Jess, is I've found through my career that making some lateral moves in some different areas, whether it's underwriting or strategy or consulting, making those moves around, and I've spent my whole career at Zurich, but those moves have really helped me become better rounded. And I've built technical knowledge in each of those roles as I've gotten there and as I've grown into them. But I think to experience that full spectrum, and I think to maximize your own value, be really open to those lateral moves. Don't always just say, well, I'll get promoted when my boss gets promoted or retires. There's a lot of other ways to advance your career. I've found them personally very gratifying, and love to talk to you about it further if you're interested. So I think with that, we're going to transition over to a poll question number 2. So Rachel, pop that up. And Jess, can I bring you into the conversation here?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, David. It's interesting in a digital society, right? There's trade-offs, and the cyber risk is definitely one of them, but it's an exciting space. Maybe you're recruiting me. I don't know.
Anytime.
All right, the question we have up here, I'm currently pursuing one of the following. So if we could take a moment and have everyone do a quick reply to our poll question. We'll transition into talking a little bit about the future and how to steer your career. All right, so it looks like the majority of you are full-time job after college or summer internship. And then I see a little bit kind of a close third on another type of opportunity to gain some work experience and skills. So actually, I'm really excited to see the responses that we got. We'll go ahead and flip to the next slide there. It's actually a great transition because, you know, there's been a lot in the news about really what does it mean to be graduating in a pandemic. Last year, a lot of internships were canceled or cut short. And, you know, you think about the 2020 graduates and there's this sense of frustration that sometimes you hear with, you know, layoffs or freezes that really led them in some cases to losing, unfortunately, that dream job opportunity that they landed for post-graduation. And there's a recent study that I saw by Monster that cited 45% of 2020 graduates are still looking for work. And that overall, younger workers between 20 and 24 are experiencing a higher unemployment rate than the nationwide average at a little over 10%. So on one hand, you've got these headlines on the left side of this slide, right? And they're probably no surprise to anyone. I'm sure you've seen them in the media, but hopefully you've also seen a sense of optimism and the anticipated increase of opportunity in 2021. I can tell you in the space that I sit in, I'm definitely seeing this play out. So if you look at the year-over-year numbers from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the growing trend is one of demand exceeding supply for employers. I can tell you that is 100% accurate. The data for US openings versus hires that you see here from Q1 of 2021 shows that there were only 8 hires made for every 10 openings in the US. And that's a really powerful statistic when you think about it. That means every employer out there that had openings was only really filling 80% of them. They're still in the market for that other 20%. So, you know, looking at these headlines and kind of thinking about what that labor market means for you, who would you be competing with for an opportunity? It's that estimated 45% of 2020 grads that are still looking for work, and especially those who focused really on gaining experience over the past year, you know, whether it was through freelancing or getting a job that maybe wasn't the dream job in general, but, you know, being able to get some experience or, you know, busting out a side hustle to network and learn and gain some transferable skills and really enhance their marketability as the job market opened up. So although you're hearing some things maybe from on the news, you know, the Congressional Budget Office, I believe, recently forecasted that the number of people employed won't reach pre-pandemic levels until 2024. I just want to share, there's reason to believe that things could improve much more quickly. So a recent survey even from the National Association of College and Employers supports that, showing that they expect employers based on a survey of employers to hire more new college graduates from the class of 2021 than they did at the class of 2020. But that in general, demand is high in the labor market. So, you know, if you move to slide 2 here, or slide 2, I guess it's slide, thank you. No matter what stage you're at in your career, I think the headline really is that gaining experience while you're pursuing a degree and taking on your first professional role after graduation, or even looking towards that next step in your career journey, you actually have a lot of opportunity that you own to strengthen your position as you look for those opportunities. And some of what David shared about, you know, being open to a lateral move is a great example of this. I like to talk about it in the context of PIE, and this is something that was shared with me some time back by a senior executive who had been introduced to it by a mentor, and it just resonated with me, partially because it's so simple. Really, managing your personal and your professional brand is easy. Like he said, it was easy as pie. I love things that are easy to remember, and so this has stuck with me. So I'll do a quick walkthrough. It starts with your performance. You know, make your experience speak. Get creative with how you demonstrate the skills and capabilities that you've acquired. So what are employers looking for? They're looking for talents now, more than ever, really, that demonstrate things like adaptability, flexibility, ability to navigate ambiguity and change, problem-solving capabilities, and also resilience. So think about how you can show you have those skills. think even about over the past year. What experiences have caused you to really dig in and use those skills in different ways, and how can you highlight those? Another is, taking advantage of learning and volunteer opportunities. You can gain a lot of experience that would be attractive to a future employer in a myriad of ways. Holding a leadership role on a committee or registered student organization, whether it's a fraternity or sorority or club or, Gamma Iota Sigma or other student associations. It shows motivation, it shows leadership. It also demonstrates time management skills, being really mindful of your accomplishments and prepared to share and showcase these during an interview and on your resume as well. And then equally important, think about some of the roadblocks that you might have occurred along the way in those roles or even academically. How did you navigate those? How did you get to a successful outcome? What did that look like for you? Those are things that will really show not only that you have the awareness of them, but that you've actively work through those items to get a successful outcome. And don't be ashamed to share your failures. I always tell people that. We always want to say, hey, what are our successes? Guess what? I've learned a lot more from my failures than my successes. So sometimes just having that learning moment, that vulnerable moment, can really differentiate you. And with that, get creative, right? Internships are obviously a great way to gain experience, but it doesn't directly mimic what you want to do necessarily after graduation. That's okay. It just needs to offer some transferable experience. So if your internship was canceled last year, for those of you who might be raising seniors in particular, that's okay. Put it on your resume. Really, from an employment perspective, employers understand that 2020 was a very challenging year. So if you were selected, it's still a compelling accomplishment. I would not worry about putting that on a resume. As a matter of fact, I would encourage you to. And like I said, don't underestimate the side hustle. You can gain a lot of experience through part-time jobs while you're in school, whether it's at a local restaurant or a retail outlet, or even within your college or university. Those roles, either as a teaching assistant or resident assistant, or perhaps within a college community, those can be a great asset on your resume. They're commonly tougher roles to get. So employers recognize that, and that counts. It really, again, is a great differentiator. And don't forget the academics, right? We can't ignore that. That's why you're there, right? All of these are nice to have, great to have, differentiators, but I always say be brilliant at the basics. So stay focused on your academics as well. And then your image. Be prepared. We've all heard the old adage, if you fail to prepare, prepare to fail. It's true. So be prepared, whether it's a virtual interview or as we start transitioning into more in-person interviews, have either a hard copy or soft copy of your resume as appropriate. Make eye contact, have some questions in mind before you start talking to someone so you don't find yourself flat-footed. I always say if you're doing a video interview, see if you can join a little early, test the lighting, make sure everything's working. There's nothing like the anxiety technology issues create to kind of set you a little off course at the get-go on an interview. So try to take that out of the equation. And some things don't ever change. You should always send a thank you. An email is fine. But just really kind of reaching out, whether it's a class talk or an interview or a career fair, just keeping it simple. Thank you for your time. It's good to meet you. I look forward to meeting you again. And then maybe a little something to make yourself memorable. If there was a specific message you heard or something you discussed with that person, go ahead and flag that. So it kind of makes it a little more personal for them. And then just staying engaged. That's a great way to promote your interest in the industry of interest and also to gain some ongoing learning and insights, whether it's through news or newsletters online or LinkedIn. Companies definitely sense when you're passionate about the work versus just looking for a job. So wherever you're engaging, wherever you're getting your content and perspectives or sharing your content and perspectives, just know that that stuff really counts. And then finally, your exposure. You can't underestimate the ongoing pursuit of new network contacts. I love that I'm sitting here on this call and I'm actually seeing that happen in the chat. I think that's amazing. I think Spencer provides a great platform for that networking. So I think for the most part, I would assume you all are already all over that. Companies are really interested in lifelong learners, people who are curious, people who are motivated to grow and to develop themselves. The world continues to change, right? So the professionals who really embrace that change, they're a true asset to companies because they'll continue to transform themselves for the future as those companies do. So build your network, go after some certifications. You know, I always say think local, right? The give and, excuse me, the give and the get tied to involvement within your community and charitable organizations is huge. You know, you're contributing to helping others, but you're also gaining new skills and experience. And through that, you're often expanding your network in the process. So I think to David's point earlier, you know, just being open to opportunity is key too. Sometimes it's just about getting a foothold, you know, keep an open mind, take advantage of opportunities when they come. You know, a former boss of mine used to say, do the work nobody else wants to do, right? And you know what, that work can be really exciting. So be open to doing it. So those are just some ideas, and you're going to find a way to make this your own. But the real foundation of this is that if you're actively managing your performance, your image, and your experience, you're actually taking power back into your own hands, and you're able to better control your future just by doing those things. And it also puts you in a more competitive position, I would say as well. So I can't wrap up today without doing a light touch on what Zurich offers, right? Zurich North America, as some of you may be familiar, is really a leading provider of insurance products and services to individuals as well as to businesses. Zurich North America actually insures over 95%, I believe it is now, of the Fortune 500. But it's also part of a multinational organization under the Zurich Insurance Group. So while we offer a wide range of entry-level jobs, there's also a lot of room to grow here. So we've designed some programs, kind of thinking about our relentless pursuit of a brighter future for our colleagues, our customers, and our communities. One of the simple ways we approach that is not by asking what can go wrong, after all, and risk management, that gets asked a lot already, right? Instead, we ask what can go right. So this applies to our opportunities as well. We've really designed the program showcased on this slide with helping our employees to truly reach their own potential. So some roles that I would just highlight, you know, require a college degree, and others that can help you earn one. Our apprentice program is a great example of one that is an Earn While You Learn program. We launched this program back in January of 2016. It was one of the first of its kind to be certified by the U.S. Department of Labor. And it's a very successful model. It addresses workforce sustainability, which is something we care deeply about at Zurich, as well as providing really a debt-free path to professional careers. So this is a program that's grown year after year at Zurich. We expanded it once again, even during the pandemic last year. So while a lot of things were dialing back at organizations, we doubled down on this program. We really believe it's the future of work and how talents experience new industries. So we're offering it in Schaumburg, New York City, Atlanta, and then various locations across the Western United States as part of our crop insurance program. And our plan is to grow it again in 2022. So it's a program we love and we're really excited about. It typically attracts people coming out of high school or transitioning from the military, as well as some career changers as well. I saw a lot of interest in internships. I'm going to try to wrap this real quick. So we will be launching our internships. You will see them in early August. The objective of our program is to get students who are currently enrolled in a degree program to kind of parallel that experience. It is definitely a great opportunity to not only learn more about the industry, get hands-on experience, kind of showcase yourself for a future career opportunity, but also to connect globally. One of the things we're doing in 2021 is ensuring that we have global match events for our interns across Zurich. So as a multinational company, it's important to us to have that connectivity, and that's something that's present in this program as well. And then we have several prestigious training programs. We have, you know, kind of a cross-section of opportunity that goes across actuarial, claims, finance, risk engineering, and multiple areas of underwriting. And those programs vary in length from 12 months to 3 years. But it really is a very holistic approach to training the program trainees on Zurich strategy and culture, on the Zurich way of underwriting, and really just ensuring that the completion of the training programs, those participants are able to transition into full-time opportunities, and they're on their way. This is a great path for them to further their career with Zurich. So more on that can be found. I'm going to kind of wrap it up on zurichna.com careers. I would definitely encourage you to take a look if that's of interest, and or visit us on LinkedIn or follow us on Twitter. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Rachel.
Awesome. So we have this final poll question, which I'll pop up really quickly. David, if you want to introduce this,
Sure.
feel free.
Yeah, so I mean, based on what you heard, how relevant do you think cyber will be in to your career? Very relevant, somewhat relevant, really not that relevant, or completely irrelevant. So go ahead and respond real quick, and tie it together.
And I'll give it one more second here. Here we go.
Cool. So everyone thinks it'll at least be a little bit relevant, and the vast majority of us think cyber risk is likely to be highly relevant in your career. So that's really, I think, mission accomplished, right? We really wanted to share a little bit of both technically, what is cyber risk all about? How do you navigate your career towards it? You know, Jess offered some awesome tips to really drive your career. So I know we're kind of, getting close to the end of time, but let's take some questions here.
Great. So we have a number of questions in the chat, and I'm going to start from the top and we'll go down. And before I go on, David, Jess, and Ron, are you okay with going over a couple of minutes for those folks who can stay on, seeing as we only have a couple left?
Fine with me. Yep.
Really fine.
Okay, great. So let's dive in. So we have a question from Dovi Das. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your first name. Here's the question. How long after a breach occurs do you have to report it without losing coverage?
Oh, it's a good question. It really varies. So at the basic core of it, an insurance policy just wants you to do the very best you can to mitigate the risk. And I'll be very honest that most companies, even the ones that know what they're doing, don't know that they've been breached for days or even months after it happens. So I would generally say that insurance is responsive to that, and it's not as though, if you don't report it in 24 hours. I think, what needs to happen is once you know about it and once you start to remediate it, you need to let the insurance company know so they can get involved if they have that right under their policy.
And I think within the terms of the contract, it depends on the contract. So rather than being overly specific, given we're a global company and around the world, it may vary. But basically, the term of the reporting conditions are in the policy. Yeah, and it'll say that you either have within the year or within X period of time, because otherwise, it's something that if somebody shows up and tells you about something that happened way down the road, and it happened a long time ago, there's nothing you can do about it. You can't even investigate it properly. So, there are some time limitations.
Yeah, good point.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Ross, who has a question on premiums. Our cyber policy premiums almost doubled from last year's rate, and I wanted to know if this is caused more from the hard market we were in or the increased amount of attacks and damages.
Yeah, really great, very informed question. I'll offer some thoughts from my time as an underwriter, and maybe Ron has some thoughts from a global perspective as well. I don't think double is quite accurate, and I don't have industry figures at my disposal. I would think certainly, premiums are up mid double digits in terms of rate. There's other factors at play that you always have to think about when you think about rate increases or premium increases, which is, what is the underlying coverage? Is it exactly the same year over year, or has that changed? Have limits been reduced? Has coverage been removed or tightened? You're absolutely right. And for those who don't know what a hard market is, the cyber insurance market has been seeing both price increases as well as coverage reductions or restrictions, which is a very natural part of an insurance cycle. And I guess I'll just end with, I think it's both due to the attacks that we see, the cost of individual attacks, because if you think about why insurers have price increases, it's to cover claims that they foresee happening. So if the cost of each individual claim is rising, prices need to rise to account for that. But Ron, do you have any additional thoughts?
I think that, look, the other thing that when you think about cyber and you think about the insurance industry, this is a relatively new product in the sense that some people have had elements of cyber coverage, but as a major product, it's turned into a large, when you look at the millions of policies that are in place, if you looked at 10 years ago, that was not the case, or 5 years ago, it wasn't the case. And so as experience is gained and people start to see the loss patterns, and the insurers start to see what is the nature of the risk, how well prepared are companies, and what you're seeing is that even well-prepared companies, even companies that have great programs, are finding that they could be breached. If you look at the headlines that David showed. And so what it shows is the balance between the amount of risk that a company has taken, how much should a premium be paid, what are the appropriate limits, and insurance companies are trying to balance their books so that over time they can stay in the business. So that's where you see the kind of recalibration as there's more knowledge about what kinds of loss patterns are there out there, how much premium does it take for us to take on the risk. And that's why you're seeing a rising market really in cyber in terms of pricing, limit reductions and deductible increases, terms and conditions changes, because look at the loss pattern. It's just enormous. And you can see why more and more companies who may have been reluctant to buy cyber insurance in the past are starting to think, not only because of the risk transfer, but also because of all the things David talked about, all of the pre-breach work you can do to kind of prepare to avoid a problem. And if something does happen, how do I get back in business? So it's pretty complicated stuff, as David showed. And as Jess talked about, it just means the number of range of jobs and opportunities there are to try and figure this all out is huge.
Great. We have a question from Madison. In terms of cybersecurity coverage, what is the extent of that coverage when we talk about that? So talking about ransomware, repaying customers who lost money, reputation damage, et cetera.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I won't be able to do it justice in the short time I can respond here. I mean, there's a lot of resources, including if you go to zurichna.com/insurance/cyber, there's a brief overview there of what our policy covers, and our policy is very similar to other industry policies. But in short, the cyber insurance policy is designed to cover you as an organization if you suffer a cyber breach, or as it's defined in that policy, and it covers both can cover both first and third party liability. First party liability is going to be your lost income, your extra expense as a result of this unforeseen incident, anything that comes out of your company's pocket can be reimbursed or compensated. The third party liability, and that's the third party, is really where cyber insurance started, was when people were the victim of identity theft, because Herf Jones was, not to call them out, but as one example we already raised, if a company is breached and your personal information is caught up in that breach and exposed, you're the victim. And so you're that third party that would also be covered. So that could include the cost to notify you that your identity information has been compromised. You may be eligible for credit monitoring and other identity protection services. All of those would be the third party cost. It's all pretty complex stuff, I'll say, and it's growing, as Ron said. I mean, the types of losses we're seeing are very different from the types that we saw 5 years ago, where that was mostly credit cards and health records were the things that we're seeing exposed. Now we're seeing ransomware, which is targeting companies and actually leading to business interruption claims most of all.
Great. I have a question that's going to be posed to Jess. Is overqualification a problem for not getting a job?
Yeah, I saw that one in there. So, I think that the thing you have to consider if you're truly overqualified, right? And that's somewhat subjective. But I always say kind of go back to what's listed as a required qualification and a preferred qualification. And if your qualifications are 10x that, okay, maybe you're overqualified. That actually doesn't mean that there is a hurdle to being considered. Oftentimes what it means is if you are the person who's overqualified, sometimes it just means that the compensation perspective might not be what you're looking for, right? Because you have to keep in mind that, the role is going to be compensated based on what the true requirements of the role are. Versus maybe what you might be bringing to the table. So sometimes it's okay. Sometimes people say, hey, listen, I've done that in my career. I've said, you know what, I'll take less for this role because I'm going to gain experience and I know that's going to serve me well in the future. And guess what? It was a great bet. It panned out really well for me. Those aren't bad moves to make, but you kind of have to make that with the knowledge of, well, I'm going to lose a little bit in my pocketbook for a bit. Right, as a result of that. So it's more about the compensation being out of alignment sometimes with people's expectations.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna just bring one more question to the fore and then I think we should probably wrap up, but thank you so much for all of these fantastic questions and this engagement from the audience. So we have a question from Aman. Would property damage and or bodily injury under cyber be reclassified as general liability or crime for total cost of risk?
It's a tough question, and smarter minds than me, I don't know, have quite figured it out yet. I will say generally, cyber insurance crosses a lot of boundaries. My background is as a property underwriter, and so there's always the concern of, well, if a company is hacked or breached and they get into the industrial controls and let's say they turn off the sprinklers or they run a machine, at double speed or something, and it causes a fire and the building burns down. You're in a real gray area here because, the ultimate loss was really what was the policy intended to cover, but the source of the loss is actually supposed to be covered under cyber insurance somewhere else. So I think to your question, will things be reclassified? The way the insurance industry, in my experience, tends to work is through the courts. So we try to write as crystal clear a policy as we can. Ultimately, sometimes there are, legal actions and lawsuits, and they get resolved in the courts, and the courts decide one way or another how that clause that it should be interpreted. And so that's really what changes our industry is when those verdicts or those court decisions come through. Sometimes we'll change our policy language going forward to try to get back to the intent that it was that we had, but I can say that my personal view, which I think is pretty consistent with a lot of the industry in Zurich, is that, we want to put out something that's very clearly covering customer for the risk they're worried about. And we want to keep it contained to that because it's impossible for us to price and assess a risk outside of that. And so that's always the goal. It's a tough thing, but again, that in my experience, both on the consulting side as well as the underwriting side, that's what makes this such a fascinating industry. Is it's not black and white. It is not as easy as it may sound, and we need people to help us evolve that.
Yeah, I would just say that first of all, it's a great question. I think the whole concept of total cost of risk is something all of you should pay attention to, because when you think of insurance and you think about one part of insurance is the premiums, another part is the losses, another part is the retentions, another part is the loss prevention costs and how all of the things that go into that, and then there's uncovered insurance, self-assumed just because there's no coverage for it, and there's other components of cost of risk as well. So how you determine to categorize stuff that goes into your total cost. There's many different ways of doing it, and there's no rule that forces you to do it one way or the other. I think the point that David was making is really a high-profile point that all companies were trying to clarify what extent of cyber coverage is there or is there not in either property or liability policies, because people want cyber to cover cyber, and they don't want to have companies buying line of property or casualty or something else expecting to try and cover cyber insurance when that wasn't the underwriter's intentions. So different ways of classifying it. And I think all of these losses and all this attention you're seeing in the news and what David showed as some of the headlines show you why it's such a high profile area and why underwriters are very clear about it. So I'll just say in closing that, look, thank you again, Rachel, and to the Spencer Educational Foundation team, who do such a great job of representing the insurance industry and engaging and creating connections between younger people, students like yourself, new graduates, people looking at trying to better understand what's out there in the insurance world. And we're delighted to be part of it. And as Jess said so well, it's up to you guys. Reach out to us. We're a big player in this field. We're always interested in new talent and in young talent, and Jess and her team do a terrific job of explaining, where people could fit in, et cetera. So we look forward to hearing from you as well. So thank you, Rachel.
Thank
Back
you
to
so
you.
much, Ron, David, and Jessica. That was a fantastic session. And I also, again, want to extend a big thank you to this really awesome audience for all of your really engaging questions. We hope you'll join us again for our next session. We're taking a break next week for the July 4th weekend, and we'll be back on Thursday, July 8th at the same time for a session entitled Winning Approaches to Big Losses, presented by Jeff Cohen and Jim Blinn of Zywave. So thank you so much, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you again.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.